I have a propensity to speak longer than I should. And so in order to prevent that from happening, I've brought some slides and some things, and so I can promise you that this will be the best 4 hours of your life. You need not be concerned about me going too long. I don't know if you can see that or not. That actually is the, we call the Stan clan. So I've got my wife Tamara and 3 kids, Reagan, Troy, and Tyler. Troy actually is the 4th Floyd, but we call him Troy because, we didn't want 2 Floyds in the house. Mom calls Floyd both come.
Whoops.
Was it that bad already? So we called him Troy, and oddly enough, Floyd and Troy sound exactly the same from the other side of the house. We didn't do ourselves any good. I want to begin by giving you just a kind of a brief background of how things started for me, and you'll better understand where things are today when you hear what happened early. And I'll do that as quickly as I can. I was born and raised in the Church of Christ. My grandfather preached for the Church of Christ. My dad preaches for the Church of Christ. And I can tell you that from the standpoint of missions, at least in the churches that I was raised in, missions was not a big focus. You went to church Sunday morning, you went to church Sunday night, you came on Wednesday night, obligation fulfilled. That was pretty much it. We had a pancake breakfast every now and then, right? And so we knew that missionaries existed, but we never saw them. We never heard about them. It was very, very rare that would happen. And so I grew up having no desire to do missional work whatsoever. Just wasn't on my plate, wasn't a vision I had for myself. And I, quite frankly, let me just say this. I'm not afraid to fly. I'm afraid to fall from 30,000 feet. So it's not, planes are great. They're great ways to travel. I just don't like it when they do this in the flight. And to go along with that, I had an inner fear that anything outside the U.S. was unsafe. In fact, my wife couldn't get me to go to places like Cancun or the Bahamas or Hawaii, oddly enough, because it was outside the continental 48. And anything outside that was unsafe, and to be blunt, I liked my head staying on my shoulders. And that was my view of the world. And so I would not travel outside the United States. And so my wife, who was raised with her own desire to do missions, not just by herself, but with her family, that was always something she wanted to do, was to do missions. Short-term missions, and it's never long-term, but short-term stuff. And how she got hooked up with me, I don't know. Because I wanted nothing to do with that. And so she had kind of resolved in her mind that she was going to be the wife who took her kids, and they were going on their mission trip, and I would wave from the front door saying, "Y'all have a good time." My wife and I met very early. I was 21 and she was 19 when we met. We knew each other for 2 months when she became pregnant with my daughter Reagan. In fact, I think there's a picture. If you want to hit that, there we go. So that is, I don't know who that guy is, but that was my wife. In fact, people talk about their better half. I think that was my better half. The other half of me there. I'm not sure I think the other part of it. Anyway, so that was my wife and I. At that point, we knew each other for a month. That was a semi-formal dance that we went to. And 2 months later, a month later, we found out she was pregnant. And a few months later, if you hit the next slide, had my daughter. And then over the next series of 14 months, we had 3 more kids. So we have 14 months between each of our kids. So our children are 12, 13, and 14. Welcome to life, right? And yes, I do know what causes that, for those of you that are thinking that question. So, I started life with my wife very, very early. Had 3 children very, very early, and it was not the life that I had envisioned for myself. I had this imaginary life of what life was supposed to be, the life that I was supposed to be doing, and it wasn't supposed to be with that. It was a series of events that occurred, but it wasn't what was supposed to happen to me. And so I spent the next several years living in a dream world of trying to make my life be what I wanted it to be. And that included having affairs. It included doing all kinds of things that I wasn't supposed to be doing, and doing them behind my wife's back, up to a point that I was ready to leave. In fact, there were multiple times where I had actually planned on leaving my wife. I had already arranged an apartment, I had already arranged everything that needed to happen, and oddly enough, just as I was about to prepare to leave, she'd get pregnant again. And that was kind of the way it went. Oh, you're pregnant again? Okay, guess I'm staying. She didn't know about any of this, but that was what was going on in my mind. So, I would justify my affairs by saying that, she wasn't the woman she was supposed to be. She wasn't the girl I thought she was. I only knew her for 2 months. When all this happened, I didn't know what I was getting into. She wasn't what I expected. And so I would justify all these. So I constantly looked for a way out. But over time, I started getting into church. She was steadfast. Steadfast. She's got a woman who's a rock. That woman right there. So over time, she started getting me back into church, and things started happening. There was one day where I said, you know what? I think this is the day. I think I want to choose Jesus. Now, mind you, I'd been baptized 3 times already. That's a whole other story. 3 times in 3 different religions. That's a story for another time, because we will go 4 hours on that one. But I was ready to make the commitment for the first time, myself, my choice, I want to be baptized. And so I got baptized. If you want to go to the next slide. There I am. Ready to be baptized, about to be dunked. It was a great day. I came out of that water feeling refreshed and feeling free. And I said to my wife, I said, honey, I am not going to lie anymore, because I was a gigantic liar. I could tell lies like the best of them. I said, honey, I'm not going to lie anymore. She goes, really? I said, that's right. Gentlemen, never tell your wife you'll never lie again, because she'll ask you about all the things she thinks she's lied about before. And so she asked me, she said, okay, have you ever cheated on me? That was a moment where I had very little time to make a decision on what I was going to say. And I didn't say anything, I just nodded my head like this. And the demeanor of her face changed in such a way that I'll never be able to express to you guys. The hurt that she felt, the pain that she felt. Now, the benefit was that, one, I'd finally been able to tell her something that I'd never told her before, that had been with me for a very long time. But 2, all this had happened pre-baptism, pre-Jesus. And so that was really the saving grace, I think, in our relationship, was that she knew that I had changed. I was not the same guy I had been before, and that we could move forward with that being the foundation, that being the building block, and all would be well. And so it took some time, but we were able to get back to a good place, a place of trust again, which I feel like I really had to earn, and I should have earned it. I needed to earn that. So we started over and felt new and felt relieved. So then I started working a lot. I actually got a great job. I was managing multiple car washes, oddly enough, in the Frisco, McKinney, and Allen area. And I was making a ton of money. And when I say a ton, I mean, for me, it was a ton, and to the point that I could actually acquire and buy anything that I wanted. And if I couldn't buy it, I could trade car wash services for it, because everybody needs a car wash. Yeah, everybody. So, I was the king of the world. Now, my first job in high school, I was an Elvis impersonator at the Midland Hilton. Now, there he is, the king. Not the king we're here to celebrate, but he is, and was considered to be the king of rock and roll. And he was, I love Elvis. I think Elvis is the man. I don't want to say it right now, don't make it. But that was who I thought I was. Not that I thought I was Elvis, but I was the king. I could do anything I wanted to. I could have anything I wanted to. The world was at my feet. I was king of the world. And I lived my life that way. And I would work 18-hour days, making tons of money. My wife and children would exist. And to be quite honest, for 5 years, I have no idea what my kids did. I went to work one day, my daughter was 5. I came home one day and she was 10. That's really what happened. And in the course of that, I was unable to go to church. I worked on Sundays. I worked almost 7 days a week. And my relationship with God faltered, fell apart, and I started getting back into some old routines. Now, I didn't cheat again, but I was never home. And Tara and I fought all the time. And I got back to that mentality of that my life wasn't what it was supposed to be. Yeah, it's been, 9 years, but I've been wanting to leave all this time. This isn't what's supposed to be happening. And the bottom line was that my wife was a spiritual woman, and still is. And I could not do the things I wanted to do as long as I was with her. That was really the bottom line. So I decided once and for all I was going to leave, and so I packed up my stuff, and in February of 2008, I moved out. And it was a temporary thing. We were just gonna, I couldn't figure out my issues while I was with her because, she was so this and she was so that and everything was her. It was always her, it was her, it was her. But ultimately it was always me. And so after a few months of living on my own and just loving life, getting to do all the things I wanted to do and hang out with people I wanted to hang out with and do all kinds of stuff that I wasn't supposed to do, I decided I wanted to file for divorce. So I did. But I didn't tell my wife, and there's a series of reasons why. One was, I wanted to be able to tell her without the children around. And so I knew that a week later, the kids were going to be at their grandparents' house, and I was going to be able to share with them, to share with Tamara what my plan was and what was going on. Little did I know that when you file for divorce, if you don't choose the box that says, have them deliver, by a messenger or whatever, that it becomes public record automatically, and all these attorneys get the list and start soliciting for services. So I'm driving to my wife's, to our house I'd moved out of, and she calls me and she goes, "There's something you want to tell me?" I'm like, "No, not really." She goes, "Why are you divorcing me?" So here's the second time now that I'm caught in a situation where I have very little time to respond. I'm like, "What are you talking about?" And so I got there, and we had a very difficult discussion. But I would describe that time as my spiritual death. Even though I'd been baptized years before, that was the point where I had really decided that I know what God wants me to do, but I just don't care. It doesn't matter to me. This is what I want, this is what makes me happy, this is what makes me feel good, this is what I'm going to do, regardless of the consequences. So I turned my back on God, I turned my back on my wife and on my children, and decided to move forward with the divorce. Now, I was still making a bunch of money. However, the economy started to change, and the owner of the car washes came into my office one day and he said, "Floyd, we got to make some changes. The economy is not what it once was, and I need your salary. So today's your last day." Okay, no problem. I'm the king of the world. I can get another job right now, it's no problem. So I left, and it's amazing how hard it was to get a job. I mean, I would go into a place and they'd say, "I'm sorry, sir, you're overqualified." I'd go into another place and say, "I'm sorry, sir, you're underqualified." I could not get a job. And so as the bills started to pile up, and I was getting to a point where I was already paying Tamara child support, just kind of going through the motion as if we were already divorced, and so I would know how to prepare for that. And she called me and she goes, I don't have the payment for this week. And I said, "Yeah, I just don't have it." And I was telling her the situation, what was going on, and I said, "I don't know what to do. I can't pay my bills. I'm a month behind on my apartment. I don't know what I'm going to do." And that woman had just sold a vehicle of ours, and she took a chunk of that money and she paid all my bills. She bought me groceries and stocked the refrigerator in my apartment. She's an amazing woman. I call her Saint Tamara, because only a saint could put up with what I was and what I put her through and the things that I would say to her. But I remember that what she said to me was that no matter what happens, no matter what situation that you're in, just remember that you can always come home. And in that moment, I felt like for the first time, I actually saw Jesus represented. Here was my wife, who I told I didn't want to be with anymore, who was essentially washing my feet and saying, "You can always come home. Arms wide open, ready to receive you. All's for you." So, after some hard thinking and, quite frankly, a lot of crying, you know how hard it is to call the woman that you're leaving and say, "Can you help me?" And then when she says yes, just from a pride standpoint, I was on my knees. I had nothing left. I was at the bottom of what I thought my life would be. And so, seeing Jesus in Tamara was what I would call the resurrection of my life. I had been spiritually dead, and I truthfully had been buried at the point where I decided to file divorce and to move forward. And my wife, through the help of Jesus, resurrected me from the dead. She gave me, or helped me, to find a new life mentally, spiritually, with the kids, with everything. And so, one of the conditions of my return was that I would go to the next men's retreat, because I had no male friends. I mean, everyone that was in my life was just gone. And I worked so much, I never had time for friends. And so she said, "You need to go to the men's retreat." I said, "I don't know anybody." She goes, "That's the point." So I drove to Pine Cove in February of 2009 and went by myself. And when I left that weekend, I had 30 guys that I would call friends. Some that are closer than others, but that weekend for me was the springboard. I heard a guy leading worship, actually, Evan Miller was leading worship at that retreat. One of the guys leading worship, and I said, "I think I can do that." And so I walked up to the guys and I said, "Hey, if I want to sing, what do I have to do?" And they said, "Well, you just go to, this guy in the church and you do an audition and then they'll let you go in." I said, "Awesome." So I called and I scheduled it and I did the audition and I sang in choir that Sunday. And things began to kind of springboard. What's the next slide? Oh, there she is, St. Tamara. So this, gentlemen, was not long after the men's retreat that my wife and I decided we were going to renew our vows. And so we, on our 10th anniversary, well, what was not to be, we renewed our vows. And that was the ceremony where we renewed our vows. Go ahead, next slide. So started leading worship at church over some time. Now, there was some growth time. It wasn't that I just came back from being, wanting to be divorced and all of a sudden I'm leading the church, like I'm some spiritual guy. There was some time between there. There was a lot of growth time. There was a lot of prayer and a lot of questions that I had to answer. Make sure we're on the right page. But over time, I began to start leading worship, and one of the things that I think is one of the most grounding experiences for any guy, to stand up in front of a bunch of other people and lead. Not just in worship, but in anything. If you are a leader of anything, and for men, most of you, that includes leading your family. There's an element to that is awe-inspiring and extremely scary at the same time. That you are responsible for something. That the buck stops with you. That everything that happens because it was your decision. There's something about leading that changes who you are. And through the process of being in the choir, but leading worship, going to life groups and those things, my heart began to change. To a point that I was not the same person that I was before. We talk about people who have spiritual deaths, they accept the gospel, and we say, in Uganda they say, "You're born again. You're a new creation." Gentlemen, I was born again. I was a new creation. I was not the same man that I was before. And so, in roughly February of 2010, Ray Fry, who's the missions pastor here, got up on stage and he announces this brand new first trip to Uganda. Now, mind you, I'm afraid of falling. I will not travel outside of the United States. He announces this trip, and I'm sitting on the second row. And it was like, I still can't explain exactly what it was that I felt, but I knew without a shadow of a doubt, I had to go to Uganda. And so I remember leaning over to my wife and saying, I think I have to go to Uganda. And her response was, you know that's not in the U.S., right? That's not in Georgia. Uganda, Georgia. So I got on the plane to Uganda, having no idea why I was going. Donald was with me that first trip. In fact, it was a really great start because we got to the airport only to find out that our plane had been canceled, flight canceled because of mechanical issues. You gotta be kidding me, man.
Wing fell off.
Fortunately, we changed airlines, but we got there, and I had a purpose for being in Uganda in that I led our worship team. We did medical clinics in the morning, medical, dental, vision clinics in the morning, and in the evening we did full-blown gospel crusades. We built a church. We would have the gospel crusades. There'd be preaching, and it'd be translated. People would do this old-fashioned altar call. People would walk forward, and those people were the beginning of the church. And so we'd spend 3 days in each village, and then we'd move on to the next one. And so here are some pictures from the first one. There's leading worship and vision clinics, and yes, I do dance. In fact, there was one moment where a pastor got up after I joined in dancing with the Ugandans and said, "You have all been blessed. You've seen a white man dance." For a guy who's an attention hog like I am, that was awesome. So I knew I had a purpose for being there. I was leading the worship team. That was my ultimate, my job, right? But I didn't really know why God wanted me to be there. Well, we're driving into the second village. It's the fourth day, but the first day in village number 2, and I'm on the very back of the bus. Everyone's piling off the bus, and I get to the last step, and this Ugandan man steps in front of the bus door and cuts off my path. And he leans forward and he says, "I want you to know, I walked here from the last village to find you."
Wow.
And of course, I'm thinking, this is why I don't leave the country. Situations just like this. And I said, "Okay, all right, why are you looking for me?" And he said, "Because you saved me yesterday." I said, "Brother, I saved you? I've never seen you before. When did I save you? What are you talking about?" And what he explained to me was that the night before, when I was leading worship, he had connected to me, and that through that connection, he decided he wanted to accept Jesus. And he knew that I wouldn't know that. So he walked 5 kilometers to tell me. Well, that changed some things in my mind. Gave me a lot to think about. And so I processed over the course of the next 2.5 weeks, what was God trying to tell me in that, through that conversation. And so I got to a point where I said, okay, if I had said no to going to Uganda all those months ago, would this man have had the same opportunity to accept Jesus that he did the night before? And the more I thought about it, the more I processed it, I said, I don't think so. I believe that God puts people in our path, and if we deviate from the path, then those intended moments for us are lost. Now, it doesn't mean that God won't or can't make more for that person later, but that one that was meant for he and I is gone because I chose to get off the path. And so by the time the trip was over, I was left with a fundamental question, and that was, who doesn't get saved because I choose not to go? And do I want to be responsible for that? And so we flew home, and my wife picked me up, and I unloaded 3 weeks worth of spiritual high on that woman. And she just received. And I said, I don't know what's going on. I don't know what I'm feeling. I don't know this is my first time trip. Uganda, season, this and that. She's like, how was the plane? Okay, not important. So I'm sharing all these things with her, and I quit my job. I came home, and I gave a 5-week notice to quit my job. And Rafe is calling me, right? Rafe is like, Floyd, people have these first mission trips, and they make these decisions. Floyd, don't quit your job. Just give us some time. The feelings you're feeling will go away. People make bad decisions. My wife went to China and came back with 2 kids from Russia. Just be patient. Don't quit your job. And I said, no, Rafe, I don't think you understand. I don't know what I'm supposed to be doing, but what I'm doing now isn't it. And so I quit my job. And I told my wife, I said, honey, I've got to go back to Uganda. I've got to understand, was this a first-time mission trip experience, or is there something more to this? And she goes, absolutely, you should definitely go back. But remember, I'm the one who's wanted to do these trips all these years. I'm going with you. And I said, well, it was just she and I, that second year. So second year we went to Uganda, it was just she and I, and it was a different trip because it wasn't just all about me anymore, now she was there. And she came to me about halfway through the trip and she goes, you don't have to make a decision now. I just want you to think about this, I just want to put this in your mind. You know, she sent me a spread it, right? You know how they do. And I said, okay. I said, I already know what you're going to say, don't even say it. She's like, what? I said, we're going to bring the kids next year. How did you know? I said, honey, I've been feeling the same way. And so, we're both on the same page about bringing our children. Now, just a year before, I refused to leave the country, which was her apprehension, that I would no way let the kids leave the country that quickly after that time. But I was feeling God saying, nope, you need to bring your family, you guys need to come in. And what God's doing is He's building my awareness and my acceptance to missions through the course of these trips. So the second year, my wife and I went. The third year, we took our children, and there's something about your two boys working with needles that's scary. In fact, I got a report at one point on the third trip that Troy had been stuck with a needle. Now we're in a very high area of AIDS in Uganda, and you can imagine what I was thinking, and so I ran over to the tent, just like, okay, what's that? Thinking that we're about to have to go through some stuff. Right? Only to find out that he poked himself with the needle as he was opening the brand new package. So, it was okay. But anyway, we, last summer, went as a family to Uganda for 2 months. And the point of that was, we wanted to experience Uganda outside the confines of a mission trip. People from the second year that I went to Uganda, with just Tamara and I were saying, Ugandans were saying, you're going to move here. And I would laugh. You're out of your mind. I'm not going to move here. What are you talking about? I'm just here to do mission work, man. I'm not sure what God's doing, but I'm just here to do mission work. And the third year, even more people, and they were talking to the kids, you're going to move here, you're going to move here. And the kids were like, are we going to move here? I'm like, oh, we're not going to move here. What are you talking about? Tamara always said that, the biggest part of going to Uganda, the most expensive part is the airfare. And so if you're going to fly there, it'd be awesome if you could just stay for more time and really get to know the people and spend some time. And I said, okay, let's do it. If we're ever going to contemplate the idea of moving somewhere like that, let's actually know what it feels like to live there outside the confines of a mission trip. So we went for 2 months. We went before the mission trip came, when we lived there and we bought groceries there and we cooked for ourselves there and we learned what it was, for the most part, to live in Uganda, at least as Westerners. And the mission trip came and we joined the mission trip, and then they all went home and we stayed for 2 more weeks, because it's different when your friends are there and they leave and you're still there. That experience is different, so we wanted to experience that too. About 6 weeks into the trip, I had taken each of my kids on a walk individually, and I was asking them, if you had to choose, because it was time for their input, if you had to choose between moving to Uganda and doing whatever we would do here, or staying in the U.S. and do what we do there, what would you choose? And all 3 of them said, I choose Uganda. That's very rare for you to have a family where you don't have at least one holdout that says, And I expected it to be Troy, because he's the guy who loves to play video games, he loves to, watch TV, loves to do those things. These are things he would have to give up. And he was the one who surprised me the most. Now, for those of you that don't know my son Troy, he's a little different. He's got some learning disabilities that prevent him from doing things the normal way. And so he does not pick up on social cues whatsoever. So if he's talking to you, and he will talk to you, if he's talking to you like this for 10 or 15 minutes, and you just finally had enough, and you go, okay, that's great, awesome, and you turn your back, he'll just walk over here and keep on talking. Okay? He does not get it. Now, at the same time, because he doesn't get it, he doesn't easily get offended. Nothing bothers him personally. It's just, oh, well, you're done. Okay, fine. Move on to the next person. Someone's about to hear me talk. No problem. So he was the one who surprised me, because his response was, Dad, I choose Uganda. And I said, why? And he said, because I can be myself here. I said, what do you mean you can be yourself? And he said, well, I don't offend people here. I said, what do you mean you don't offend people? What are you talking about? And he has picked up on the fact that when people are annoyed by him, or when he goes overboard in his conversations or in his questions, whatever else, that he looks at that as that he is offending people. And in Uganda, they are so relational. They want to talk all the time. In fact, it's quite frustrating for me as a business guy because I'll go in expecting to do a 30-minute meeting on an agenda that's been preset, and we'll be there for 4.5 hours talking about everyone's goats. That's frustrating. But for Troy, it is perfect. All he wants to do is talk and relate, and they love it. In fact, I cannot go to Uganda without them saying, first thing, not how's Tamara, how's Troy? They love Troy. One of the pastors there tried to do a child swap. He said, I'll keep Troy for a year, you take mine home for a year, and we'll swap back next year when you come. I'm like, I don't think it works that way, but I think something's going to go down. Another pastor basically did as much of an adoption of him as he could and gave him his name. Now, for a Ugandan to give someone their name, that means a lot. And so, Pastor Johnson was the one who said it. He said, you can have one of my names. You can have Mukumbi, or you can have Johnson. And Troy goes, kind of like them both. And he goes, you can have both. So Troy will tell you that his full name is Floyd Irvin Mukumbi Johnson Stanley IV. And he owns that name. That's who he is. Troy is the kind of guy who I could see going to Uganda and never coming back. My daughter will come back to go to school, and Tyler probably will too, but Troy will probably be in Uganda the rest of his life because he just fits. And when you look back at life when Troy was born 13 years ago, I've never asked God, I've never said, God, why did you make Troy the way you made him? Why didn't you make him like everybody else? I never asked that, but if you look back 13 years ago to his birth, did God make him that way because he knew one day he was going to go where he fits? You kind of go nuts trying to put your head around that. But God has a plan. He always did. And he had a plan when I left my wife. He had a plan when he reunited with my wife. And he had a plan when I sat in church that day and they mentioned Uganda. He had a plan when he sent me. And he's had a plan the whole time. Uganda has been a place that I never really wanted to go to. And now we're moving there. In November. What's the next slide? I don't remember what we had next. So here is the property in Uganda. This is not to scale map, but it does give you a general idea of what it is that we're going to do in Uganda. This is a 200-acre property. If you want to click the zoom in for me. 200-acre property where we're going to have a primary school, secondary school. The closest hospital to this property is about an hour drive. So we're going to build a hospital. We're going to have a vocational school. We're going to have a Bible college. We're going to have housing for unwed mothers. And let me explain that for just a minute. Because there's a traditional view of life by Ugandans. It's, if you get pregnant, regardless of the reason, and I will tell you that it doesn't matter if it's rape, and oftentimes it is. If you're pregnant and you're not married, you are shunned by the community. And the issue is, you've got a child. So what these girls will do is they'll leave the community and they will discard the child and then return. And typically what they do is they drop it down a 50-foot latrine. Well, that's not okay. We're not okay with that. So we're going to build housing for unwed mothers. What we're going to do is we want to have a place where moms can stay with their children, can be taught how to take care of them, can have a place that they can foster love and acceptance, can have a place where they can go to school, or they can go to vocational school and learn a trade, but they will be able to provide for their child and not feel like the only answer is to get rid of it. And so, if my understanding is correct, by the time that we're done with the build-out of the unwed mothers, we'll be able to handle up to 600 unwed mothers and their children. Wow. This project is very, very big. It's way bigger than most people understand. It's sometimes bigger than I think that it is. We're going to have housing for orphans. We're going to start in January with 50 orphans. These guys will go to school. We're opening the first 3 grade levels of the primary school in January. And then every year we'll add another grade or 2 as we build up the project. To the point that we'll have primary all the way through secondary school and we'll have a Bible college on site. If you'll click it again, one of the things that is extremely important to me as a business guy, and I've always wondered about ministries, I've said, why do these ministries pop up and they have no idea how they're going to be self-sufficient? Or they're always reliant on somebody else's money? What happens when the money dries up? Well, the ministry dries up. Well, fortunately for me, the Ugandans who came up with this plan said, we want to be self-sufficient. And I said, awesome, how are you going to do that? And so there are 4 business models that are on this property that they're going to use in order to try to be self-sustaining. The first one is the crop cultivation you see on the left. We're going to build a mill. Now, just to give you some information real quickly, how are we doing on time?
It's 9:20.
When do we normally end?
About 9:30.
Okay, awesome. I'll wrap this up then. The area of Uganda we're moving to is right in the middle of Uganda. It's central Uganda, and it's called the Graveyard of Uganda. The reason for that is that 26 years ago, when Idi Amin and the Civil War was happening, the North and the South came together, fought in the middle. When it was over, they all returned and left the central area just desolate. Very, very few schools, no infrastructure whatsoever. People live there, but there's no life. They exist. They sit in their front yard, and they wait. All day. That's all they do. There's nothing to do. There's no jobs, there's nothing. You just sit and exist. Eat whatever grows on the tree, and exist. Now, there are children whose roles are to go and fetch water. There are some kids who their entire existence is getting water for the family. They'll walk 3 or 4 kilometers to the water, to the well with their 2 jugs, fill it, walk back, pour it in the container, walk back, fill it up, and all day long, all they do is walk forward and back. That's their existence. That's their role for the family. So we want to bring life back to the graveyard. In the same way that I was spiritually dead, ironically enough, and was risen, we want to bring life back to this area that's not just spiritually dead, but physically dead, economically dead. So we're going to build a mill. We're going to grow these crops. The primary crop they grow there is maize, which is basically another version of corn. We're going to build a mill where we can mill the maize into flour and sell the flour on the open market. But at the same time, people from around the community can come and bring their maize. They can have it milled into flour and sell it as well. So now we have our first level of infrastructure as well as our first jobs creator, because we'll have to employ people to run the mill, to work in the mill. The next thing is the juice factory. We're going to build a juice factory. If you go anywhere in Uganda, primarily in the capital city of Kampala, and you go into a gas station, you can buy containerized juice, and it's almost always imported. Well, fruit grows in abundance in Uganda. I mean, there's a good chunk of it that just rots on the ground because it's not consumed. So you have this huge untapped market of juice containerization, and we're gonna containerize juice and we're gonna sell it. Now, you have your second level of infrastructure with the juice plant. You have another jobs creator, people to come and work in the juice plant. And now people that live in the surrounding community can bring their fruit to us and we'll buy it. And now you have money changing hands. So we're revitalizing the area. We're building infrastructure and an economy. We're going to have, there's only 3 there. We're going to have 4 fish ponds, 2 catfish ponds and 2 tilapia ponds that we'll raise. That'll provide protein for the property, but we'll also sell the extra that we have on the open market. But all of that pales in comparison to the eucalyptus trees. The whole right side there you see is eucalyptus trees. The bottom section there is 25 acres of 2-year-old saplings which are planted now. 10 years from today, roughly, they'll be ready to be cut. Now, eucalyptus trees are important in Uganda because they grow very, very tall, they're very, very round, they're perfect for building, they're perfect for support columns, they're perfect for anything that needs to handle weight. They build it, these are for furniture, for everything. And the most important part of it is that because of the eucalyptus oil, termites won't eat it because the eucalyptus burns it. So it lasts. So it's a very expensive wood. So we had a couple companies come out and look at the 25 acres, and we said, if in 10 years, what would you give us to take this wood, to log it? And the average of the two, depending on, there's 2 bids. One was if they were planted close together, so you had a lot more trees, and one is if you planted them separate. But the lower of the bids was $5.5 million. Brothers, that'll do a lot of ministry in Uganda. So there is a 10-year plan to be completely self-sustained. And in a world like we have today where people are relying on everybody else, the Ugandans have a plan to be self-reliant. Now, I can't take credit for any of this. This is a Ugandan plan, but what they said was, here's the areas that we don't know what we're doing. We don't know how to start a business. We don't know how to do job creation. We don't know how to do that. We know how to plant. We know how to grow. We don't know the business side of it. So my role is to come over and to help administrate this property. From construction to the hiring of headmasters, to the hiring of teachers, to the business development. That's my job. Because that's what I do. That's what I know. My wife, who has a degree in math and has a master's degree in special education, is going to work with the school system. She's not going to teach. We can't actually work in Uganda. We cannot make a living in Uganda because unemployment is at 80%. And the government says a Westerner cannot work here unless they can prove that what they're doing is something a Ugandan cannot do. And then you have to show documentation over the following year showing how you're training a Ugandan to take the job, which is a great plan for Uganda. That's what they should be doing. But because of that, we have to go over as volunteers, which is why we have to raise support. I'm not here to talk to you about raising support. I'm here to tell you what it is that we're going to do, so we'll leave that at that. If you click it again for me.
Where's your house on that?
I'm going to show you. I'll show you in just a second. Here is the property. This was back in September of last year. I don't know if you can see it with for me it's kind of blocked out, but it's just bush country. There's one building that was there in May. That's that building there. That's the first dormitory, which will house, initially it'll house the orphans, but ultimately it'll actually be for the kids that are coming to do boarding school. They primarily do boarding school in Uganda, and so that'll be for that. The next video, this is the beginning of the primary school now. That's the first leg of the primary school that's going up. It's got a roof. There's a second dormitory there. It's been plastered over. That's the central leg of the school. So you can see the construction is happening. It's not just one building anymore. There's the inside of one of the dorms. It's not finished yet, obviously, but it's going up. Now, we don't have to finish the entire school to open in January. We just need one leg because we're just opening 3 grades. So the focus is on that. There's the primary school there on the right, located in the courtyard of it. It'll be like a horseshoe shape with the courtyard in the central part of it. That dirt plot that you can see there in front, that's actually where my house is going. So if you click the next slide, that is the spot, looking from the primary selections of sitting on the road. And here's the construction process of the house. Now we raised the money to build the house. We had 2 donors who were very gracious in helping us to do that. It's been a process. It's been hard to watch it go up and not be able to have input. You know, there are structural things that we wanted to do, plans we had for different bedrooms, things like that, to be able to hold more beds, and there it is. That's the most recent picture I have. So it's going up. Gentlemen, we leave. If we leave on time, Pastor Johnson's coming to the States for our November World Cultures Conference that we have here. And initially we thought he was going to be going back right away, and he isn't. Last I heard, he could stay into the first week of December, which would delay my departure, because I can't go until he's there. So the plan is to leave November 11th, but if he stays longer, probably sometime the second week of December we'll go. But that's the plan. That's what we're going to do. Now, the last thing I want to share with you, and then we'll wrap this up. There's a guy, a missionary, his name is Oswald Smith, and I've never heard of him. I had never heard of him, most people haven't, but he said, we talk of the second coming, but half the world has never heard of the first. So gentlemen, that's what we're going to do. We're going to call this community New Life Uganda. Because, yes, we're going to have orphans who have lost their parents for any number of reasons, and we want to be able to share with them a new life. The ability to come to a place that they can call home. They leave the school, and they don't say, I'm going to an orphanage, they say, I'm going home. With a person who is a mother and a person who is a father. They may not be married, but they act in those roles, because kids need a mom and a dad. If you look at the number of our prison population, the thing that they all have in common for the most part is that they didn't have a dad in their life. There's ministries that have moms, they have house moms, but they're missing the masculine side. So we're going to have moms and dads. There are people who live outside of the community that just exists. We want to be able to give them and start a new life with them, to be able to come to vocational school and learn a trade and begin to provide for their family and do something in a way they never thought they'd be able to before. But more than anything else, guys, there's the spiritual side of new life in Christ that we want to share with them the first time Jesus came, so they can be prepared when he comes the second. That's what all this is about. We want to build infrastructure, we want to build a community, we want to do all that, but we want to share Jesus. We want to bring life back to the graveyard. William Carey, they consider to be the father of modern missions. And he was listening to a seminar, in a guy from India, a doctor from India, come, and he was sharing with them about the harvest just being plentiful in India. About there's just, people just need to come. We need workers. And William Carey's friend said, it seems like India is a gold mine. We just need to go and dig up all the gold. And William Carey said, I'll descend into the mine if you remember to hold tightly to the ropes. And it's the vision and the image of a man descending into a hole in the ground to chip away in the mine and the men on the top all holding him, and his life is in their hands. And the more guys you have holding a rope, the less pressure there is on each of the people that's holding a rope. And that's what he's saying, is that don't send me into India and not support me. I need someone to hold the rope. I'm talking about holding the rope in prayer. There are times that we've been in Uganda where there was no amount of money that was going to solve the problem we were in. There was a lady who was giving birth, and the main artery had been cut and she was bleeding out. And they came to us, they said, "What's your blood type? What's your blood type?" And of course we didn't match. But how many Ugandans do you think know their blood type? Big old zero. So all we had was prayer. And so Tamara typed up an email, she sends it to everybody that we knew, and please pray for this. All we've got is prayer. And guys, more than money, prayer is almost always the answer. Prayer brings the money. Prayer brings everything. So when we talk to someone about being on our prayer team, and we have about 54 people on our team right now, we're very, very serious about it. It's very, very common in our society, especially, to go, "Oh, I'll pray for you," and you don't take another thought about it. It's just a natural response. Kind of like when you go to the movies. "Enjoy your movie." "Oh, you too." Wait, I'm going to the movie. So prayer is extremely important, guys. We need prayer. Yeah, we need finances too, but prayer is more important. So there's the holding a rope of prayer and holding a rope of finances. So the ministry that William Carey started became the Baptist Missionary Society. Anyway, I want to show you one more video, and then we'll be done. This kind of gives a little bit of background real quickly, but it also shows the irony of this whole thing. So I want to real quickly just tell you a story. This is 2014. In 2010, I came to Uganda for the very first time, and I had a history and a past of having no desire whatsoever to do mission work. I wanted to stay at home, I wanted to work, I wanted to have a nice life, make lots of money, and do those things. And so I really refused to consider the idea of doing short-term missions or any missions at all. Even local missions were not appealing to me. However, in 2010, I felt a very strong urge, a call from God, that I needed to go on a mission trip to Uganda. It was the first year they were doing this trip, and I felt like I had to go. Didn't want to go, but I felt like I had to go. And so I got on the plane to Uganda having no idea why I was going, only that I felt like God said, "You need to go on this trip." And on that trip, we did church planting, we did medical clinics, and those things. Well, on that trip, we came to a property. There was 175 acres of land that Victor Living Word Church in Uganda has purchased over time. And they brought us to this property, and they showed us the landscape, and they gave us the theme and the idea and the vision of what this property would be. And I can tell you that I stood literally on this spot right here. In fact, we'll go out there right now. I stood on this spot as Pastor Johnson described to us the vision of what this property would be. And the only thing that was here was this dormitory. And even though the dormitory is not done yet, it was the only building on the property. So as you can see now, we have another dorm, and there's primary schools coming up on the other side. But this is the property itself. It's beautiful, it's lush. Is almost without an end. And I stood in this very spot as Pastor Johnson gave the story and the vision of this property, and he said, "This is what we're going to do." And my response to him was, "That's great. I really hope that works out for you." And little did I know what God already knew. And that was that 5 years later, in the very spot that I was standing where I said, "You know, Pastor Johnson, I hope this works out for you," that they would be building my house right behind me. So God has a plan. And when I went to Uganda my first time in 2010, having no idea why I was going, it was the only church plant trip where Pastor Johnson took us to the property. And he cast out the vision, and I said, "That's awesome, I really hope that works out." And now I'm moving. It's too ironic to be irony, gentlemen. God has a plan. He has a plan for me, He has a plan for you. And regardless of the struggles that you have in life, there's a plan. That God loves you, He cares for you, and He's made that evident to me in my life. So we're moving to Uganda. And people ask, "Well, when are you coming back?" We're not. We're burning our plows, if that makes sense to you guys. We're not leaving anything to look back to. Yes, we'll come back and visit. But we're moving forward with nothing to look back to. Where God is leading us, that's where we're going. And if He decides He wants us to come back, He'll let us know. But otherwise, we're planning on staying indefinitely. So we ask for your prayer. We send out newsletters. If you're interested in how you can be a part of our team, just get with me after. But I want to pray, and you want to dismiss, or
I'll come up.
you'll come up? Okay. Heavenly Father, Lord, thank you so much for this time, for these men. Lord, I pray for direction. Not just for me, but for each of the men that are in this room, Lord, that you would give clear and concise direction on what the path is that you would have them walk in their lives. Yes, there will be stumbling blocks, and yes, they'll fall off the path, but Lord, bring them back quickly. Open up their hearts and mind as well, that when we fall off the path, to be willing to hear you, to being open to receiving you, and to following your direction. I pray for each of these men, Lord, that as they are leaders of their families and perhaps of their businesses or some other entity, that you would show them how to be good leaders, that you would train them up, that you would allow your Spirit to move within them and to move within that which they're operating. I pray for this church that, while missions-minded, that you would make it more so. That we would not be a church where people come and say, I came to worship today, but they talked about who was they were helping to worship today. Father, our lives are in your hands. We dedicate them to you, to be used for your service. And if there's a man in this room, Lord, who has perhaps heard your call but has not acted, Lord, I pray that you would inspire him to do so, that he would make a move, so that your full vision for him can come to fruition. We dedicate our lives to you. We do all things for your glory in Christ's name. Amen.